A lot of what I talk about here are based on three things: A Course in Miracles, the teachings of Dr. David R Hawkins, and Muji. Dr. Hawkins did was able to utilize, his spiritual teacher, utilize something called kinesiology or muscle testing, whereby he can ask spiritual questions and get answers. So based on that research, and for me he is a relative heavyweight in the spiritual field. His book was published by Hay House, one of the major spiritual publishers. Wayne Dyer endorsed his work, another major spiritual author. I mean, very few people get an endorsement from a saint. Mother Teresa endorsed his work, a living saint, and also the founder of the 12 Steps also endorsed his work as well. So, for me, that's the validity of the numbers. But he came up with a map of consciousness, and there's actually different levels of power associated with different emotional levels. And as you evolve spiritually, you go up the emotional scale. You know, the bottom levels of consciousness are shame, and then we go up from shame, and that's at a power level of 20. Then you go guilt is about 30. Then you have apathy. I think that's about 75. You've got fear around 100, anger around 150, pride is around 175, and then neutrality. These are all the levels of selfishness. They're destructive levels, destructive emotions. You have courage at 200. Then you have the positive emotions going up, like acceptance, around 370. Love is a very, very powerful field, which starts at about 500. So there's enormous power. Like shame is at 20, and love is at 500. So the power of love is immensely more powerful for healing and love than the lower negative levels like shame or guilt. We also talk here at the most advanced level of spirituality, which is called enlightenment or peace, which is letting go of the ego. In my book, I write a little bit about, a few paragraphs about the difference between Freud and Carl Jung. Freud, Hawkins actually was a psychoanalyst of the Freudian lineage, and he at that time he was an atheist, you know, when he did his training. But so Freud basically thought that God was just a projection from the unconscious, so it doesn't really exist. It's just man sort of projecting it out there that God existed. But Freud actually calibrated on Hawkins' scale at 499, which is genius, but he didn't get to the spiritual dimension. Carl Jung actually calibrated at 520, so he was actually spiritually aware. And if you read his writings, he talks about like an infinite reality or something beyond, and was very, very instrumental. What's the difference between a lot of the therapy models for me and spirituality is that a lot of the therapy is just rearranging the ego to get better functioning. And for me, actually, spirituality is actually surrendering the ego. So it's operating on a totally different basis. And what I teach here is actually, which is a spiritual principle. As you surrender the ego, you gain access to spiritual power, which is of another dimension to just rearranging the ego, looking at what's being projected, what's going into denial, what's being repressed. If you start to let go of the layers of the ego, which is including all of its projection, denial, repression mechanisms, and also, for me, another major part is just feeling out your feelings, allowing feelings to happen and letting them process through. This allows the gradual rising of connection to spirit, and also for healing as well. So, the next part that we do is cancelling of beliefs. Just for the newcomer, okay, with Hawkins I had a spiritual experience, so I just knew that his teachings would resonate for me. And he had about 20 illnesses. He had gout, he had avian, like bird type flu, and he didn't take any medical treatment for that, even though it was more or less lethal. He used spiritual principles to let go of all of his illnesses, and all 20 illnesses let go through basically doing the Course in Miracles and applying some spiritual principles. One of the major the major things for letting go of illness or physical illness or any negative belief, if you have any negative belief, emotional belief, or any physical illness. For me, I had kidney failure, gout, asthma, horrific physical. So I just did the Course in Miracles, and there's one major lesson which is modified from lesson 14 from Course in Miracles, which is like God did not create cancer, so it's not real. How do I explain that? If you meditate or you get a spiritual connection, you realize that there's an inner, timeless, eternal silence that is within when you let go of your ego and your indulgence in thoughts and being identified or interested in the feelings or thoughts. It's like a detached witnessing or observing state. This state is actually the truth of what you are on a spiritual realm. So if you just say, look, I cancel my belief in kidney failure, I'm an infinite being subject only to what I hold in mind. In this world, it's like this world is like an illusion, which is a projection of the thoughts which are held in mind, which then manifest. So if you state the truth, that you cancel the belief and affirm the truth that I'm an infinite being, then that thought starts to lose its dominance within the psyche. And as it goes, the symptoms start to disappear. And it's worked for me. It's part of my book. The kidney failure has gone, the gout's gone, the asthma's gone. And Hawkins used to run attitudinal healing centres where people with AIDS and cancer and myasthenia gravis, all of them disappeared as the group applied spiritual principles. So I'll start today with the counselling to give everyone time to think if they want to cancel anything. It could be an illness. It could be a belief like, I'm clumsy or I'm stupid or whatever it is. Yeah. And then often I finish it with a visualization as well of how I'd like to be. Okay.